Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of It's Your Own Time You're Wasting, Terry and Olly Talk Teaching, featuring myself, Terry Wood, and my good friend and former colleague, Olly Furnival. It's been a while since we've met, haven't it, Olly? We've been
It
pretty busy,
has.
but you've had a decent week. You've had a couple of decent things happen this week, haven't you? What are they?
I've had a very big week. Tottenham Hotspur won the Europa League, so yeah, 41
Amazingly,
years. I'm having to tell a lot of people who I work with, who a lot of fans who've maybe come into football the last 15, 20 years, that Tottenham actually used to do well in Europe. It hasn't been that way for a while, so that's been fantastic, very emotional. And yeah, a day later, in Japan time, because because of the
yeah,
time difference, became 50 years old, Terry, which has given me a
blimey.
lot to think about in terms of career.
You
And
know,
I'll talk about that, what I've been doing with students
yeah,
actually in relation to that. But yeah,
yeah, you've definitely joined the old man's club. No,
that's it.
I'm past 60, so you still,
Well,
you know.
I've had two people tell me on Friday that I don't look 50, which is a bit like, oh God, nice that I don't look 50, but yeah, 50 is old, especially in our career where we're working. And
It
they
is
weren't
young
teenagers, they
people, yeah.
were actually
Yeah.
colleagues. But yeah,
It's very true. Well, look, many happy returns and
thank you.
congratulations. Right, what we're going to do today, the title for today really is, relatively controversial in some regards, though I think people may be surprised by our opinions on it. Do schools need more male teachers? Do schools need more male teachers than they currently have? And of course, we've got to be conscious that it's two oldish blokes discussing this, just to put this in
Yes.
context. But as I said, certainly in my case, there might be some surprising opinions expressed that people don't expect. Just to give you the figure, before we talk about what you know about Japan, where you are, the figures for the UK are quite stark. Currently, if I think these are correct, secondary schools, about 33% male teachers. Primary schools, as low as about 14 or 15% at best male teachers. And do bear in mind, certainly in a lot of the primary schools I go to, the one or two male teachers that you may see are often head teachers. So they're
Yes.
maybe not even very much in the classroom. There's still, I would suggest, a slight imbalance. And the males that are in primary are often the head teachers there. Not a bad
Yes.
thing in itself for those guys' careers, but that adds to the statistic, I'd have thought. Then when you add on the TAs uh, who abound obviously within the special sector of primary, particularly tend to be predominantly female, and you've got quite a skew. Well, where are we in Japan? What are the figures like there, Ollie?
Yeah. Well, I mean, before I go into that, I'm shocked, but I knew primary was low, bit lower. That's lower than I thought, but I'm shocked at how low it is in secondary in England.
Yeah,
Because yeah,
it's dropped a lot. I mean, I think when you and
yeah,
I last talked together, it was probably much more 50-50.
I think it
I think
was
in that
definitely.
20 years ish, best part of
Yeah.
20 years, whatever it is, 15, 20 years,
So,
I think it has dropped like a stone year by year. Yeah.
hmm,
Currently about 33%.
cool. That is shocking. So Japan's slightly different in the way we set schools up. Their schools are set
Yeah.
up over here. Primary is the same, same age group as back in England. And yeah, so it's 63% women, 37% male, so a bit higher in the
Yeah.
male
Not too different.
over here. Junior
Is
high,
that primary or secondary?
uh, that's primary, yeah,
Oh, well, that's a big difference. That's double.
37.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, that is. And my children were at some stages in primary school in Japan. And yeah, I'd say that's about right from my experience. Now, junior high would be like grade seven, eight, nine. And then we're going to high school for the last few years. So in
Yeah.
Japan, I know in England sometimes we say high schools, but in Japan it's actually different schools a lot of the time. Interestingly, the school I work at is a kindergarten through to university, all on one big campus, which is quite rare. But
Yeah.
junior high, so you'd go up to early GCSE age. It's pretty much 50-50, 55% women, 45% men. And then interestingly, in Japan, when you get to high school, it's only 33% women and therefore 67% men.
Oh,
So the high
yeah.
school, the last few years of school, the A-level age, it's a lot more male. But what you said about leadership, so in junior high, in primary school principals, elementary school in Japan is only 18%, but junior high school principals, 5% are female. Now, out of 55% of the
Uh,
workforce being female.
okay.
Now, that doesn't surprise me
Okay.
in the leadership opportunities for males over here in Japan. It's still very much a male-driven society, not just in education, but when you look at the news and you look at the cabinet and everything, it's just male, male, male. I have a monthly. I'm head of division, and there's quite a few divisions from K through to university, and we go to monthly meetings, and we have the head of divisions and a different range of our assistants or deputies, if you like, sorry. And yeah, about five, if you're lucky, 5% are female there. You can sometimes in a boardroom, it's literally, including
Right.
me now, just men in their 50s. But it's like that in Japan. It's not just male, it's age over here as well for teachers. The longer
Okay.
you go, you're expected to make the step up. So a little bit different than England in some ways, but yeah, the statistics there, you start more male teachers in primary, but less in secondary levels than
It's
England.
interesting you've keyed into some of the reasons in Japanese society why that might be the case. And I think societal expectations do play a role here, I would suggest, kind of self-reinforcing on why there's so few males and the number of males are declining. So it's a great contrast. I think if you were in America, for example, I don't think we'd see that much dissimilarity between the two situations. But Japan obviously has really been a more traditional society in role defined ways is quite an interesting contrast. So we'll come back to that when we look at what maybe we could do here to boost the number of men in the job. So think about what they may be doing in Japan. So we got three questions I'm going to throw at you. We can discuss. First is why, particularly here, and you've got lots of experience of here, of course. Why is the gap in existence and why is it growing? Two, does it matter? Really? Does it matter
Mm.
or does it not? Does it cause problems or does it not? And three, if we do accept that it's just not healthy to have an imbalance like that and for that imbalance to be growing, well, how can it be addressed? And again, we might
Sure.
key into Japan because clearly, in another way, there's something maybe right that we're getting wrong. Don't know. So that's the first question I'm going to ask you. I'll throw it over to you. Why, particularly in the British sense, therefore, do you think we're seeing this gap? What is putting men off? Why are they coming in and not staying or not going in at all? What do you
Yeah.
think of it?
Well, I mean, pay now, yeah, I'm going to sound very terribly old-fashioned and sexist, but if you are, and I don't know if you are the main earner in the household, which of course many people it's both or it's women, then but if it is the male, then it pays not, you're not on the poverty line, but as someone with a degree who's gone, obviously to higher education in your area, then you can get a lot more money as an earner doing other careers. So I my school friends, I'm still in touch with. I'm the only teacher who's gone in there, and we're all the same. The ones we kind of followed the same pathways in terms of higher education. But I think pay. I think as a teacher, I think I'm on a lot less. Even though I've done okay in my career
Yeah.
than some others. Um,
I
I
don't
think
think just to put it, I don't think it's that controversial to say so. It's backed up by the figures, and particularly in
sure.
times of economic stress in society and high costs, certainly in British society at the moment, that's
Mm,
the case. It tends to be that young men, tend to vote with their feet still to a greater degree more than women. More women are doing
sure.
exactly the same, of course, but you can't deny the basic economic facts that men are less likely to go towards, for a multitude of reasons, including the one you've cited, are less likely to go towards what they consider long term a lower paid profession than others they can access. Whether that turns out to be right or wrong, it's
Sure.
there in the research. Sorry, Ollie, go
Sure.
on.
No, no, no. I think there is something in that. As as we said, I'm getting older now, but it'd be interesting to see as people do go through, what's the recruitment, and is it actually pinpointing a career for men? Because it should be a career for men, but are there still stereotypes going on about? Certainly in primary, you would think, but as we've discussed previously on this channel, a lot of the job is caring. And
Yeah,
is it seen? Well, that's not a male, that's not a masculine
yeah,
profession, which I
yeah,
think is not what we've seen in our day-to-day life. But I think as an outsider coming in,
yeah,
teaching's in England's always had a more of a, especially in primary, it's a feminine profession. It's more about nurturing, caregiving. Certainly at the lower ages, more
yeah,
physically. But yeah, so maybe men are just subconsciously being discouraged about being judged, being a teacher, because maybe there's some, old things about how society was in Britain. We're not really an industrial, as much as an industrial nation anymore, but in, to step outside and go, well, I don't want to do something with my hands. I want to actually go and nurture and care for kids. Maybe that hasn't, there's still a gap there in us looking at what it's really like and getting that out to the public.
yeah. And I totally agree. And I think you're onto something there. And I think we've maybe reached the tipping point or beyond the tipping point where we get the diminishing returns. The more schools become, particularly primary schools, become female, the more any young man that might want or think about becoming a primary school teacher, particularly, is going to
Mm.
see it not as something that men do. It's tipped away from that balance where some would still strike out into it. And it becomes kind of self-perpetuating, if you understand what I'm saying. That's the
Sure.
danger, I think, that instead of looking at 15% ish, now we could be looking at 7 or 8% in 10 years. And then we
Yeah.
really are in a position where it's become a totally female job. So I think, I'm sure, and I know the powers that be are aware of this in the teacher training colleges and the schools themselves. We'll come back to later to what does it matter, and some surprising opinions I've elicited from primary schools actually about
Sure.
it that did quite surprise me.
Yeah.
Let's get straight to it. You kind of alluded to this, Joe. You were getting is this thing about the concerns about physicality, the potential for accusations or false
Yeah.
accusations
Yeah. Yeah.
about
I was going
inappropriate
to,
behaviour? Is
yeah.
that a bigger concern with young men than it is women?
Well, I can only speak as a man, but yeah, I think you've got to be obviously very careful. But even now with everything's online 24/7, and it's easy to read things with people calling each other derogatory terms all the time online. And yeah, I think it probably would have got worse. There's obviously zero grounding in it that there would be you know any man would want to go into teaching as just a way to be near young children. But I think now there's a fear in society with false accusations and suspicion, being wrongly accused of inappropriate behaviour. And I'm sure that works both ways. Women probably have that fear as well, but I think more for men than women over that. Certainly with younger children, I think probably there is that fear, and that's why some people would think, well, yeah, I don't want to go into a society where it's blame first, ask questions later. Certainly, if someone's going to raise a concern against you as a teacher, then that's exactly what happens. And of course, in teacher training, we leave doors open. I tell my staff, always we have to have a lot of difficult conversations, even with adults. In my role now, always where I can, we have someone else in the room. We'll always make sure it's written, it's reported upwards. There's all those things we can put into place, but all you need is one student who feels they've been hard done by you. All they have to say is one word, and it can just be around the school like wildfire. Certainly with social media as well. So I think that is something that is a fear, and maybe that's adding to the numbers, the lack of male teachers.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think the point about social media and how quickly false rumors or whatever it is spread is playing a big part. I mean, obviously, going to lots of primary schools with very young children, will rush into the arms of the teacher or the TA,
Sure.
needing a cuddle or consoling tears, whatever it might be. And yes, I have seen male teachers fulfilling that same role, but less so. You can see that the barriers are put in place more by male teachers who understand that although everybody knows no harm is being done, they've
Mm.
just got to be seen very clearly to have a more of a demarcation line. It's a very
Yeah.
difficult area, and as I say, it starts to become self-perpetuating, doesn't it? where
Well,
conversations.
it does. I had a running joke with when I was last in England with my sixth form IB crew.
Yeah,
Yeah, they were like, oh, yeah, we've gotten really well with them. And they'd sometimes try, 16 to 18-year-olds try and give a cuddle. Like, just don't, and it became a joke. And on my last day there, they were all giving me cuddles, taking photos. I don't like it because I don't like that at all. Not,
no,
I'm not that almost think there's going to be any comeback, but I just don't think I'm not comfortable with that. And I've never been comfortable with that. And I don't know if
yeah,
that's more of a male female thing about, I think I can be very supportive and caring with kids, but I just don't like the idea of having to put my
yeah,
arm around them or them having coming and giving me a cuddle. The school we both worked at when I was new, a girl came and cuddled me, and I went straight to the head teacher and say, "That's just happened. I want to record it just in case." And it
yeah,
was nothing
no,
untoward whatsoever. But
no.
I was just like, "Well, if I need to report that straight away, just in case." I think that can, people might think, "Well, do I really want to be in that environment?" And as you said, a lot of that could be in your own head. It was in mine.
Yeah, I think that is exactly the case. So I think probably between the things we've discussed, they're
Yeah.
probably the main reasons. It's a kind of societal
I think just to
expectation
add
thing.
one more I'd thought of
Yeah,
is now if we've got boys at school seeing so few male teachers, they're going to see less male teacher role models, and they're going to have less people they want to replicate when they grow up. Because I knew when
yeah,
I was at school, we've spoken before about good teachers, and I've
yeah.
tried to take a bit from those male teachers, and some of them had inspired me. So if I don't see that now, less
Right.
chance for me to have that person I want to aspire to be.
Yeah, well, that perfectly keys us into the next question because that is a consequence, isn't it,
Yes.
of not having a lot of male teachers, maybe particularly in secondary, where boys are starting to form those ideas about
Mm.
careers in the future. We'll come back to primary, whether it matters as much. So that's the next question.
Yes.
Is there any harm? What are the
Uh,
potential harms? What are the potential difficulties or actual difficulties of this gap? What would you say,
Well, I
Ollie?
think, yeah, I mean, first of all, I think there's the lack of role models. Not
Yeah,
necessarily, I just spoke about wanting to become a teacher, but I'm talking about positive male role models. So, unfortunately, many students now don't live with both parents, and
yeah,
statistically, they're more likely to be living with the mother. So, as a male teacher, we can be that strong male figure if they don't have that at home.
yeah,
And young boys as males and female teachers, we can give different things at different times to students. Of course, the vast majority we can give both, but there might be a time where a boy only wants to speak to a male teacher and a girl to a female teacher about something. So it might be that if there's a lack there, then, you know, the way the boy can relate to us as male teachers, if they haven't got so many, then they might feel, well, I haven't had the form tutor role. I remember my girl, when she left school, wrote, you get the lovely thank you letters. She said to me, she'd never seen a male teacher until year seven. And she said she
really.
was scared when I was all this big, loud male teacher
Yeah,
that I
yeah,
had and yeah, it turned out fine. But she just even made that point. Oh God, that was a little bit scary. So on the flip side, if boys aren't getting that sometimes they need to see that. It's not good for them. And also, as we've said, teaching's a caring profession. So it's good for male students and girls to see caring male
yeah,
adults, to see
yeah,
us talk about our vulnerability, or to see us talk about personal issues, or to see us, you know, give advice when we need to. I think that's really powerful. I always remember in a school we worked at, a female deputy head gave me some lesson feedback, and it was a good lesson, but she said you need to show a little bit more of your emotional side. And she mentioned a teacher we both know who was seen as been there for years. He was the Mr. Tough. He was the alpha male of the school. But
yeah,
she said, "Do you know in his English class he cries with students when he reads the poems, so they see that side of him. Even though he was the one on the
yeah,
behavior. He was the
yeah.
go-to man. But
I know who you're talking
it
about.
did
Yeah,
well. It did well for the kids to see him emotional. So I think it's really good for, obviously we're secondary, but even primary, for students to see males vulnerable and to see males care and to see that that's perfectly normal. We don't have to be masculine. We maybe we are at times in a job we have to be, but also we need to make sure that students can see males vulnerable. I think that's a problem if they can't see that.
yeah. I
Also,
think
I
that.
mean,
Sorry,
yeah,
sorry.
sorry.
Carry on. Mate. Keep going.
No, I think. anything in school should be preparing us for outside of school.
Yeah,
So, although it's not the focus now, we need teachers of all diversity
yeah,
in the country, okay, to reflect the whole of society. So, if we're seeing a one-sided either way, it's not giving students a balanced understanding of what society is when we go out of it. If you've only barely had a male teacher, and then suddenly, you've got to go into industry or wherever you go into, and suddenly it is a lot more male orientated. It's not really prepared you that well for it. So I think we need a lot of diversity, and that could be to prepare you for after school, but also just different life experiences. We do things differently, all people, but there are some things, a male might want to say, well, yeah, I did literature at university. It might be not be something you've thought about, but I did literature, I did poetry at university, for example. I'm not talking personally, and for a student to see, right, well, okay, that's opening a door for me to go into.
yeah. You've made some great points. You've really done that well. I mean, obviously, it
Thanks.
wasn't that far long ago, was it? We were talking about adolescence and
Sure.
the kind of
Yes.
male role model and toxic masculinity of all of that stuff. We won't go back to that today. So just key into that. And obviously, there's always the thing that comes up about boys and behavior management. We've talked about
Yeah.
behavior management. Um, we've got to consider whether do boys need male teachers to make sure they're properly disciplined in the ways that work. That's one you can come back to. So keep that in your head. And the other one I'd ask you to comment on is the ways of learning. Have we debunked the idea that there are male and female ways of learning, or does actually the kind of the competition and testing culture that we tend to see the boys enjoy more, does that clash with the female girls' propensity towards thoroughness, organization, diligence, coursework, and so on? So, give us your thoughts on that, the behavior management issue and the ways of learning.
Behavior management issue. Yeah, I've seen many female teachers very strong at behavior management
Yeah,
issues, and I've seen many
better
men.
better than the men, often better
Yeah,
than the men.
and different ways of doing it. I remember, yeah, I don't know if I've mentioned this before here, but a friend of mine, first time I saw her in the classroom when she put on the teacher stare, it was absolutely fantastic. I was still quite new, and I thought, oh my God, I didn't expect to see her do that. And I thought, oh, I remember my teachers doing that. So I think, look, I think if a teacher can learn the strategies, then I think that is usually fine. I do think there are times when a male will do it differently than a female, and it might be good. It's like the old adage: some players in your team need a pat on the back, some need a kick
Yeah,
up the backside. And I think there can be times when you can give a quick to a lad. You can probably say things that maybe a female can't, and a female can say things to a girl that I couldn't. Um, you know, I'm quite happily said to a boy, like, I'll sort your life out, that kind of thing. The kind of bantery comments. Now, I don't know how that would go down well if it was a female doing it. But I think there is that. I think, we've all got the traditional mother father ways of doing things. So I do really think that is an important part. And as I said, that's not to say in any way females don't do it better or do it as well. Each person's different. But I think it can be different ways, and it can be using different strategies with different people. I've seen females deal with girls I've had issues with and advise me, and boys as well. So I think it's probably more to personality. But if we are going to talk stereotypes, then yeah, I think it does need to be both if possible.
yeah. And the
Um,
ways of learning. So the kind of
yeah,
continuous assessment, coursework, diligence, which not again trying not to be too stereotypical, but measurable to some degree, tend to be female attributes against the
yeah,
highly competitive, short-term, up for testing sort of way of learning that a lot of boys prefer. Not all, but
yeah.
maybe a small majority. What about that?
Yeah, I think we need both
Yeah,
in schools. I
yeah,
think I've made a lot in my career of the competitiveness I do a lot of quick quizzes. I do a lot of competitions in lessons, and I can quite easily link that in with sport, with boys and of course girls. But even, when I speak to girls about sport, and I do a lot of my linking with students with the football. I think even more the boys are more competitive, just more than the girls in doing that. So I think in the way of teaching, I think yes. I don't know if I teach just that way. I don't think I do, but I think there is that sort of the way I am, and way I've seen some other male teachers be that they're in your face. Let's get this going. Let's have, little competitions. Let's make this moving around the class that I've seen quite a lot with male teachers in my career. And I think that's missing. That would go missing if we don't have enough male teachers in schools, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we can't ignore the kind of elephant in the room is that certainly in the British sense, boys are falling quite significantly behind pretty much all age
Right.
groups now in all sorts of schools, particularly working class boys. Um,
And
and we don't,
I think a
and that's
class that
complex.
gets,
It's complex, isn't it? But if we can call it the feminization of schools, does that play a part or not? Would you
well, I
say
think
yes?
it's interesting you say that about, the class, and it comes again back going back to positive role models. I'd like to see, and we've worked in schools where I've seen, working class teachers getting on very well with working class boys who maybe don't really know where they're going. Um, and I really think that's important. I really think that what we don't want in teaching is, a one class does it all, who may not have the natural empathy for how that person is or how their students are feeling. And you get that going into schools where you've got to feel like, right, I need to know about your life. I'm at the moment, I'm working in a private school in Japan, and the students primarily are quite at, the top of the, top class is different here, but socioeconomic, they're at the top. So I've really got to think about. I've come from a school where we worked where it wasn't that,
Yeah.
Um, some it's comprehensive. We had a bit of all, but we didn't have that many who, were having the luxuries that the students I teach now. So I've got to think about, well, how am I going to inspire this student? University is a given to a lot of students I teach now, whereas in the past, a big role that I did was trying to get more able students to think about university, because it wasn't really in the first school I worked at with you. It wasn't on a lot of students' outlet. Now, male and female teachers should be doing that with the students, not just, of course,
Yeah.
male. But as I said earlier, male teachers who've gone down paths at university that aren't what you traditionally call masculine ways of doing it. And I think that's really important that we don't lose that, and we don't lose students to think, oh, right, I'm going to follow the teacher into doing that, because I think that's very important.
Yeah, great points again. Just to give a little input of my own, I'd formed the view over many years, particularly in recent years, visiting so many schools, that it matters far less in primary school whether there's male or female teachers, a balance or whatever, up till about probably eight, 7 or 8, maybe even 9, but 7 or 8. It really doesn't make any difference who stood at the front of the classroom, notwithstanding some of the things we said about how you have to behave around very young children and how you support them. And then
Sure.
afterwards, it starts to matter. And certainly by the end of primary and into secondary, it really does matter. But my view was always it doesn't really matter so much at primary school. And I knew, knowing that we were going to have this conversation about a week ago, I was making a final visit to see a teacher who was finishing a program, and her senior leader. We were having a conversation. The three was two females and myself, and mentioned this and said, "What do you think?" And they said, "Oh, it really matters. It really
Right.
matters." They said, "We need more male teachers in primary schools across all age groups." And I was quite surprised, and I was quite taken back by the vehemence. It took me by surprise. So we assume that they're in this cozy world, thinking, "No, well, we can all the women together. We can do it. We don't need blokes. They're fine for other things." They don't see it that way. They don't see
Yeah.
it that way. They're the experts. They
Interesting.
see the little things that I won't do on my little visits, my
Yeah.
2 hour visits. They're seeing and understanding and experiencing things that I don't, and they were very, very vehement. No, more male teachers needed, and we can't allow this to slide any further.
Mm.
Interesting, isn't it?
No, it's very interesting. Because I would have thought the same as you without being in any way at all, especially into primary education. I do actually go into primary quite a bit in my school because I look at the students coming up and we look at the transition. But yeah, it's very interesting that they can see the need for more male teachers in a school.
Okay.
And hmm,
The final point,
surprising.
therefore,
Yeah, good to hear. Good to hear, actually.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And the final point, therefore, kind of goes back to when we were discussing Japan earlier, because it might be just kind of natural there and there's no great push needed or have taken place. But it would seem that something needs to be done before it gets completely out of hand here in the UK. What can be done, what is being done, what can be done to maybe persuade more young men, older men, whatever, to come into the teaching profession, primary and secondary? What would you think can and is being done or should be done?
Should be done. Definitely more targeted recruitment.
Yeah,
Let's get success stories out there. You know, things like traditionally you might think, well, languages, foreign languages isn't particularly heavy on male teachers. Get some teachers on the telly, in the adverts, showing what they're getting out of teaching. And I don't just mean obviously not grades, but a little couple of scenes in the classroom where you can
yeah,
see the change. You can see how you've made a difference in that day. I've seen some, and then some of them aren't too bad, but really highlight stories of men who are saying how rewarding the job is. It's just as rewarding and meaningful for a male as a female, not one for
yeah.
each other. But
The
I mean,
British,
would that
the
be?
British. Sorry, Ollie, go.
That's okay. No, so does that be the thing? The television, or the advertising, the recruitment, but also, I don't know how much a university is doing this. How much is it, put a university? This is your, you as a teacher, a degree will get you. You can go into many teaching areas with a degree. So reaching out to male undergraduates before they've made their final decision, because of the transferable skills, but going into, unis and actually therefore drip feeding that down into sixth form, into college counselling. I always do tongue in cheek when I say to teachers, "Oh, anyone want to be a teacher?" No, it's like, come on, it's the best job in the world, but there isn't. In my present school at the moment, there's one student who left, a girl who left. In the IB, we do something called a personal project in grade 10, and she worked with me to teach a lesson with me in the classroom to grade sixes. She'd lived in Europe, and it was a difference between European cathedrals and Japanese temples. And that was a few years ago. And she's just left, gone to university now. And she wrote a letter saying that's inspired her to be a teacher. And, as a teacher, there's nothing else you could want. I mean, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
That's quite rare. Thank you letters aren't. They're great.
yeah,
You don't get that many saying, actually, I'd like to follow in. So can we do
yeah,
more in school? Can we get more interns going? Can we get more boys, helping out more in leadership in schools, to actually get a taste of what it can be like? Because as you kind of said earlier, boys like competitive, boys like leadership. Teaching is leading different styles in different areas. I'm doing a big international day next week, and I'm really glad I've got some boys leading it. And I might even have words. This is you've learned a lot here. This is what we do. This is what we do as teachers. I'm going to say it to the whole my whole leadership team. But I've seen the growth here, and I really want to push on that. What about a job? What about a job doing this with teachers and in teaching? So I think universities feeding down to schools, feeding down to younger students. Even GCSE subject choices about you could teach this. It's a great job.
yeah. Great points again. You're very knowledgeable in this area. Interestingly, I don't know if you've seen them. They've been rolling for a couple of years or more now. The government-led glossy marketing campaign on the television
Sure.
to get people to teach. So they're very nice.
Yeah.
But if you notice, they tend to be mostly male.
Yeah.
So there's that subliminally working away. So they're obviously cognizant of the issue, and it's often a young man that they're placing in the classroom in the marking. So there is work going on. We're talking about television, obviously. We had a good go at the portrayal of schools in adolescence. I don't think that's
Yes.
doing any favours, frankly,
No.
but we won't go
No.
back to that. So the portrayal of schools in TV and film maybe isn't helping. Other things that occurred to me, I thought about the teach first model, which is more
Yes.
about leadership, isn't it? Getting very high achieving students from places like Oxbridge into the
Yes.
classroom but
Yes.
their model, and that gets a lot more males than the
Yes.
other teacher training arms, and I think that's because it's kind of seen as a taster, and it's working towards more leadership roles in society, and so that's a bit more complex than straightforward teacher
Sure.
training. The other thing that occurred to me was, we know that if men are, and let's not put too fine a point on it, young men are more motivated by the money. Is there kind of a role for some kind of scholarships, bursaries, in
Yeah.
some way, particularly in certain? I know they roll out to certain key core subjects, but is that
I
something
think
we should consider?
I
And
think with the money,
the other thing that occurs to me is some kind of buddy system, some kind
yeah.
of system where a young man can be attached to an experienced or up and coming established teacher, male teacher, to buddy them, work experience, and so on. Just ideas I'm throwing in. What do you
That's
think
really
about
good.
those?
Yeah, very good. I think the buddying thing really important because I think what I did a lot of citizenship PGCE students would come in and that I'd kind of oversee them. And I find a lot of thing the thing that males found hard coming in to the job was trying to have that. I've got to be the alpha male. I've got to have complete control here, and finding secondary, I don't know about primary, but a lot of students saying, well, actually, no, you've got to prove yourself to me first. A lot of young males, found that quite frustrating and quite, well, hang on a minute, I planned this and it's not working. So I think to have a strong male buddy would be absolutely fantastic to try to work them through their strategy. So actually, you kind of come in all guns blazing. That's not how it is. It might have been like that 30 years ago, but it's not like that anymore.
Yeah, and
What you said about,
the problem comes when there's not enough buddies to buddy
right,
the new
yeah,
people. That's when for example, in primary, you could have the same guy doing the same job for lots of people.
yeah,
But you've got to try that. You've got to try these things because
yeah.
it can't just keep slipping away. And what about the scholarship idea linking to inducements of some kind?
Yes.
What
Yes,
about that?
I was thinking about making it more appealing for a midlife career change. I think there's a lot, you and I are both teachers from that's all we've done
Pretty
from,
early, yeah.
in our jobs. Getting men and women, but we're talking obviously more about males in their late 30s, early 40s, who've had a bit of life experience in different ways, can be really valuable for students. But if you're thinking of a career change, then is it really appealing financially? So maybe get a lot more government financial support or golden hellos or whatever to say to people thinking of a career change.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
still young. Do you want to come and pass on what you've learned in your industry into the classroom? I think they could do maybe more with trying to tempt people in who didn't think about it as me and you did in our teens and early 20s, but thinking actually 20 years on, yeah, I really fancy going into that.
Yeah, I think there are programs, and I see them here in London, the kind of over 50s, kind of late career change people. They
Yeah,
often tend to be people that are financially relatively secure,
sure.
often actually coming from really quite high profile jobs in journalism and other industries here in London. But that's a very different dynamic. They're few and far between. They're still predominantly female, though there are males. I wonder if it's too late by then. So I think it's that if we haven't got them by the 20s, then it's got to be the
Mm,
late 30s, by the late
sure.
30s, before they are going into, start to get to senior positions in other careers. If they're disenchanted with them, that might be the time to grab them through this sort of system.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but
Yeah.
we're probably discussing things that the powers that be are wrestling with all the time. So we're not coming up with something that I don't think somebody would have sat around the table and said we need to do more of. I think
Sure.
it's just a very difficult aspect. I mean, even little things that just more work experience. Even a week or
Yeah.
a 2 day or whatever it is taster,
Yeah.
you know, do we do enough of those sorts of things?
Yes, right. I mean, yeah, very rarely. I mean, I've never known a year 10 work experience as a form tutor go into another school. I
I
don't
remember,
think
I
from
mean,
memory. I might be wrong.
when I went to see one young, and I think it was a man, young man, boy, 15, who went to teach or to be an assistant to help out because
Yes.
he couldn't teach, obviously, in a primary school. In all of those years, that was it, if I remember right.
I mean, that would be, I mean, again, it's linking it to the boys, kind of love of leadership, of, of doing things. We do that in the job. Let's just make that a little bit clearer. It's not, it does feel like it's sitting marking the whole time, but it's not. It's achieving. It's results. It's what, as you said earlier, a lot of boys are inspired by, and I think getting that out there and getting the on top of that, the caring side, what you get emotionally from the job, I think that's, I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking that might be stopping people who just thought, well, maybe I could get that elsewhere. I don't really relate that to teaching because when I was at school, I was at school and I left school in a 93. I didn't see many TAs that were male. I didn't see many counselors that were male. Getting those involved more to just make it a little bit more normal. That yeah, because when I was last at school in England, teaching in England, there were male TAs, and I thought that was great, and
Yeah.
could see what they were doing in the classroom and really good role models. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the conclusion is that um, it can't go any further. I mean,
No, there's
this has to
shocking
be
statistics.
has to be a low point, a bit like Manchester United to throw them. It has to be a turning point because we can't look in 10 years at this and say, well, there are literally zero male teachers in certainly in the UK in teaching, literally none in primary and dwindlingly few in secondary. Then we've failed, haven't we? I think because
I think
I don't think anybody would want an education system from 4 to 19 in which it's only females who are, with all their strengths and all their qualities and abilities,
yeah,
are teaching the male and female next generation entirely. That would seem to me to be a kind of societal failure. We've
yeah,
defined a role as being only female and not male in any way, shape, or form. I think that's when we're in real trouble. I think we're
yeah, and
getting
I
away
think
with. I think we're getting away with it now because there's a lot of good practice.
yeah.
Despite when you're reading the newspapers, still there's a lot of good practice and a lot of things going on, as we both know. But I just don't think it can go any further, and it needs to start turning a corner in the opposite direction.
I
Certainly, in
think it
my
does. I
opinion.
think your statistics were shocking to me at the beginning, and I've done it before we met today. I've done a bit of, looking at a few articles, and the one I found is Rutland in the East Midlands had 53% of primary schools with no male teachers. Over half their schools don't
No,
have a
none
male
at all.
teacher.
Yeah, yeah,
None. That's really bad. I mean, as we kind of pointed out earlier, there should be everyone representing all facets of
yeah,
society because that's what we need students to get used to, mixing
yeah,
with a lot of people.
yeah.
So you're watching this and you're not a teacher and you're a male, get involved.
Yeah, well, hopefully for those few people that watch our videos, we're doing our
Yeah,
bit, Ollie. Hopefully, who knows?
yeah.
Some young people, some young men might have picked up on what we've been saying over the weeks and months and thought, you know what? Yeah, if I can be anything like those two, I'll be all right. Well,
Yeah.
no, not to joke. Hopefully, somebody somewhere has thought, you know what? I've thought about doing this. These guys do talk a lot of sense. I think it could be a good life and a good job for me. I'm going to get in, and I
Yeah.
might even persuade a couple of my mates to do the same because
Yeah.
that's the point, isn't it? If as that it's trying to get the ball rolling so that others are attracted in because the first mate goes in and
That's it.
he reports really positively and the others then follow rather than the
That's it.
opposite. First one goes in, fails, says never again, it's a terrible life. Well, that could be a whole group that
Yeah.
where some of them may have been considering it and they don't.
That's it.
Okay, let's leave it there as ever.
Great.
Please,
Enjoyed that.
if you like our content, please press the like button, share our content, subscribe, please. Nice to have a few more
Please do.
subscribers. you want to email us, we've got the email Terry and Olly talk teaching at gmail.com. That'll be on
Correct.
the end of the recording here that you'll see. And hope you like what you've seen and it's given you
Yeah.
some pause for thought. Right, Ollie, I'll leave you to it.
Cheers,
Congratulations
Tel.
again on
Thanks,
reaching
everyone.
50. And
Thank you very
we'll
much.
we'll speak again on some
We
other
will do.
topic very soon.
Cool. Enjoyed
See you now.
that.
Bye
See you.
bye.
Bye.